This is B&B Radio, the official podcast for Bolus and Barbells. Today I'll be interviewing Kat Turner from Down Under. Kat is a aerial performer who also is a type 1 diabetic. So stay tuned and we'll have a little word about the update for Bolus and Barbell events in 2017 after the episode. And I'm here with Kat Turner today. And so, Kat, let's just start off with the basics. What is your age and your date of diagnosis? Am I allowed to ask age? Is that still...
Yeah, you can. That's fine.
Is that not taboo?
I'll answer. It's fine. So my age, I am 32 on Monday, actually. And my diagnosis was November 13th-ish, 3 years ago. So that makes it 2014, I think, if my math works.
Yeah. So still in that sub 5 year category there.
Yeah, still a newbie.
So you were diagnosed kind of later on in life.
Yeah.
Not too late in life, obviously. But what's your diagnosis story? Like, how did you start noticing problems?
Yeah, well, I'm type 1.5, so my experience is probably a bit different to most people's. So for those who don't know, type 1.5 is a slow onset type 1. So the end result's the same. I am currently insulin dependent, but it presents early a bit more like type 2. So the symptoms are weight gain, fatigue, lethargy, really bad brain fog. So I was definitely feeling all of that. So I went to my GP and they misdiagnosed me as being depressed initially and put me on a kind of, I know, right? Well, all I could say was that I just felt wrong. I didn't feel right. So they put me on a type of antidepressant that can affect your liver. So I had to go and have a blood test 3 months later to check my liver function. And that's when my blood sugar came back quite high. And I kind of went, probably just had a juice that morning or something. And they were like, no, it's a little higher than that. So I had a bunch more tests. My original GP was totally useless, to be honest. He sent me home with a packet of metformin, not even a blood glucose meter, and just told me not to eat French fries. So I got home and did some digging on the internet and just went, this isn't right. That's not me. So I rang my local diabetes association and they kind of panicked and got me in straight away and told me what test to ask for antibodies and that kind of stuff. So that's how I then got the diagnosis of type 1.5. So I managed for almost 18 months without insulin, just diet and exercise. And then, I guess 18 months ago, started on the shots, and here we are.
So, wow. So that's interesting. And I think that most type 1s are still a little foggy when it comes to the different subclasses of type 1, like 1.5 and LADA and stuff like
1.5
that.
and LADA are
The same thing. Okay. So it's what's the other one? Modi?
Yeah, I honestly don't know what that one is myself. So
you would think I would know, and after this, now I'm going to have to go look it up because that's going to drive me nuts. Now, something that you said that was really interesting to me is that your GP missed it. Obviously, that's a pretty common thing. We get that over in the States as well. But you called a local diabetes association, and so while we have the ADA and the JDRF, what does that look like over there?
Yeah, they've gone through some changes recently. So Diabetes Australia used to, as well as a lot of information and resources and access to dietitians and all that kind of stuff, they used to also distribute supplies. In Australia, we're obviously under socialised healthcare, so our system for accessing diabetes supplies is a bit different here to what it is to you guys, I understand. Just very recently, they've stopped doing that distribution and now they're just purely education, advocacy and services for people who are in the diabetes scheme, which is what they call it here in Australia.
Interesting. Yeah. So, do they also do advocacy and fundraising type stuff, and
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
so it's
But
all kind
also a
of
lot of, yeah, they have a lot of services. So here, when you're diagnosed, you join this thing called the NDSS, the National Diabetes uh, Service Scheme, something like that. Having that membership allows you access to the Diabetes Australia education services. They do a lot of forums, they do like shopping tours and stuff, so information on label reading and carb counting, all that kind of stuff. But they also do advocacy and fundraising.
wow, that's a very much a needed thing over here, because we have the American Diabetes Association, which puts a lot of focus on type 2. Kind of
Yeah.
understandably, people get upset about it, but it's kind of understandable when type 1 is only accounts for 5% of all
Yeah.
diabetes
I mean,
does. So you've got to think that 95% of these people need help too. And whereas
absolutely. And Diabetes Australia do type 1 and type 2. So they'll have information forums that are different for, each group of people, obviously.
yeah, so that's interesting. I was completely unaware of uh, of how that would have worked over there. That's pretty neat. Um, so now, what I think is really neat, and I think the listeners are going to think is really neat, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are a aerial performer
And teacher, yes.
and teacher. So not only do you do this, but you teach others how to do this. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is really interesting, and I think we're going to find out that it's very physically demanding, more
Yeah,
so than
absolutely.
people would probably think. I mean, I think everybody is at least familiar with what it is, but me being a personal trainer and looking at the positions that you're holding, or
Yeah.
with limited equipment that you're having to hold on to, your grip strength, your back strength, your core strength has got to be just phenomenal. The ability to move your body through space is much more difficult than people realize.
Yeah, it really is. And I particularly notice that when my students come along and I'll demonstrate something, they'll be like, oh, yeah, no worries, I'll have a crack at that. And then don't get off the ground. So
That would be me.
it, it's good fun. Yeah, so my specialty is trapeze. So I do a thing called static trapeze, which is not the one you might be familiar with where people fly through the air and catch each other. This one's just me and my trapeze. So there's a bit of swinging, but there's not so, we don't do the flips in the air and then some big dude catches us. It's just, yeah, me and my trapeze. I also train aerial hoop, which looks like a hula hoop that hangs in the air, and silks, which are the ribbons that most people are probably familiar with.
So to me, I think the ribbons, just thinking about it, I would feel like the ribbons are probably the most demanding, or is it
Yeah.
more of you can get wrapped up in it and kind of allow it to hold your weight some?
Yeah, there's definitely rest positions, but ribbons are really difficult because you are just hanging on the whole time. With a trapeze, if you want a rest break, you can sit and make some pretty shapes. Um, yeah, you can't do that so much with silks. Even when you are wrapped in, you still have to hang on and hold yourself. And the other thing people don't realize about silks, particularly, is when you're wrapped in, it's basically tying knots around the soft parts of your body. So it's really not a comfortable situation at all. You end up with these awful bruises that look like strangulation marks all over you. So,
So
yeah.
does that explains why most of the time when I see these performers, they're wearing like full body suits.
Yeah, the
Uh,
other reason for that is because the rope burn you get from silks is awful because it's so fine. If you slide, it
mm,
just takes your skin off.
oh, that sounds
Yeah.
miserable. I
And yet I
appreciate it.
do it for fun.
Well, I mean, I deadlift cars, so I don't feel like I've got any rocks to throw over here. So how would you train for that? Like, that's very physically demanding, and so I mean,
Yep.
obviously you spend a lot of time practicing the performance itself. But do
Yep.
you do anything outside, like in the gym or just
Absolutely.
with body weight training? So
So most of the training happens in the air. So it's just drills. So we do lots of climbs with no legs, lots of inversions. So that's where you're basically in a dead hang and you have to lift your body upside down. So we do lots of inversion drills, lots and lots of flexibility training as well, which tends to happen more on the floor. But I mean, I couldn't remember the last time I've been inside a gym, so I don't need to lift things when I've got myself to haul up a rope.
And that's the thing about it is you would get to the point, and you see this a lot with endurance athletes, where there's a fair amount of strength needed, but if they were to actually go in the gym and lift weights the way that I would, they would add size, because that's just kind of what happens. The
Yeah,
muscle would get larger, and so that body weight becomes very counterproductive
yeah,
when you're doing that. So I'm sure the same things, especially true for you. I mean, if you went into the gym and just added 10 pounds to your body weight, even if it was all muscle, your grip's going to fatigue much faster. Your core's going to fatigue much faster. So, how long are these performances typically versus how long do you train?
yeah, absolutely. So, typical kind of performance. So, if I was just doing a single act rather than a full show, a typical performance would be kind of 6 to 8 minutes at the most. So they're not, they're not long, but then I will train anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a week. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah. So you're acclimating a lot of time.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, half of that's also technique training. Like obviously, the techniques are really, really important when you're in the air, and you need to know that you're safe. But yeah, lots of training.
So when you're instructing people to do this, do you all use safety harnesses, or do you just lower the implement down to the ground, and that way it's two
Yeah,
foot to fall instead of 20?
absolutely. You can't really use safety harnesses with this because it gets tangled. So
Mm.
it is a matter of doing things very low to the ground and taking things in really baby steps. So whenever I teach a move, we do, step one, which might just be the bit where you get upside down. And then we do the next step and the next step until you're working up to the whole move. And also, I mean, the great thing about beginners is typically they can't get very high off the ground, so there's not a long way to fall.
I don't know. Falling 2 feet would hurt me.
Oh, we
But
always have crash mats as well. So
I'm just a big sissy though. That's the point. Um, how long have you been doing the aerial performing?
only about 5 years, but I had 18 years as a gymnast behind me. So
So definitely some prior background that lends itself to what
yeah,
you're
yeah,
doing currently. Uh,
definitely.
what do you have any uh, competition achievements from back in your gymnastics days?
I did all right, some state level stuff and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, nothing like it wasn't Olympic level or anything amazing like that.
That's a very very small window of people that get in there, but yeah, I guess. And see, I went to a very small school, and so we didn't have a gymnastics program like some of the bigger cities would have. So I'm not even sure how it breaks out regionally here, but I would assume that you have interscholastic contests, and then you have contests by state, and then nationals.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a bit different here. We don't tend to do it through schools. Our sport program in schools is a bit different to you guys. I think it's all usually kind of extracurriculars. So you'd actually go to a gymnastics club rather than through your school. So it's all after school weekends. So then there'll be
ah,
club level competitions, state level competitions, and then national.
I'm actually a bigger fan of that than everything's integrated, like you said, into the school here, and so you have kids that are kind of forced into sports based on what time of
Yeah,
year it is, because you have to do
yeah,
something. You have a whole hour of the day devoted to physical activity, and most
yeah,
schools only break that down by sport. So
yeah, right. I
you
mean, we
know,
do have school sports here, absolutely, but they're still after school. So that's things like AFL football, soccer, netball, those kind of things. But they're still always after school. And then in phys ed class, it's more just games and running and that kind of stuff.
that's that was always my favorite part of PE class. Did, the games, dodgeball was my favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how do your blood sugars react to these training sessions versus a performance?
Yeah, it's much the same really because it's strength and even a performance, it's more endurance strength than cardio. So it does raise my blood sugar. When I was first diagnosed, they told me I would have to quit circus because the danger of hypo too high in the air was too much, which just broke my heart and I refused to listen to, thankfully. But yeah, it raises my blood sugar rather than dropping it, which is good for me.
Yes, yeah. The last thing, I'm sure the last thing you want is to be dizzy up in the air.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but that's interesting. That and I feel like most people would not think that. They would think that that's low intensity enough that it wouldn't cause that. But it's pretty intense being up there. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
so do you do anything special with your nutrition when it comes to training and competing, or not
Yeah,
performing?
performing. Well, I eat low carb generally. Just that's what works for me. I know it's a bit of a controversy sometimes,
No,
but
surely not.
let's just skip that one. Yeah, so I do eat low carb, which means I'm taking quite small doses of insulin, which is good for my training and things. I tend not to drop. But no, I don't really do anything too special for me, particularly performing. Obviously, I need to be functional, so it's more a matter of keeping my blood sugar down rather than up. So nuts, cheese, that kind of stuff before a performance, and I try and avoid having to take shots before I go out, just because I don't want to suddenly drop. But if I need to, I do, obviously. But I've been really lucky so far. I haven't really had any times where it's been too out of range either way that's impacted my performance. Even if I'm feeling a little bit crap, it's still only 6 minutes and I just have to go out and smash it out and then I can get off and lie down on the floor. So, yeah, I've had it pretty easy so far, I've got to say. Touch wood.
Yeah. Uh, well, and that's interesting to say that because it is only it's a pretty short duration, and so even if you were just say 200, oh, I don't know what that would be in your. Did you divide that
Oh,
by 18? Is that how
you know
that
what? There's a
works?
really handy conversion chart on the internet somewhere that I'll find. I know that 5 is about 100, so let's go with 10.
Yeah, 10 or 11, I think is what it
Yeah.
would be. So if you were 10 or 11 going out there, yeah, when we did the bowls and barbells in Philly, we had Gary Schneider, who's a certified diabetic
Mm,
educator, talk about how at 180, which would be probably, I'm guessing, 8.5 to 9,
yep.
is where you start to see the renal threshold break. And so that's where you start spilling sugar into the kidneys, and
Yep.
that's where we kind of start to see the negative effect performance wise. And so, but your duration is so short, you could still kind of get away with that. Like you said, you wouldn't
Yeah.
feel great, obviously, but you could still get through it and off the stage and then be able to
Yep.
treat and go on. And so you mentioned doing an independent act versus a whole show. So if you're in a whole
Yeah.
show, though, are you in and off the stage multiple times?
Yeah, generally. And since diagnosis, I've made sure that I have been, you know, not having to be on stage all the time. Um, but it's not something I've actually needed to worry about yet. Just the thoughts kind of there in case. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and it at 3 years, and like you said, you are really just 18 months into kind of, I don't want to say the full blown, but the kind of the bulk
That's
of
kind of what it
the.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of reached
Yeah.
that threshold now. So at a year and a half, uh, just the law of averages says that all the situations haven't presented themselves, and
Yeah,
so
definitely.
it's really refreshing to hear though that you have approached it the way you have, in that this is what I know could happen, so I'm just going to go
Yeah.
ahead and take the steps to make sure everything that you can to make sure that it doesn't happen. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I think in that sense, I was incredibly lucky with to be 1.5. I think we probably have it maybe the easiest because I did have that 18 months to just learn as much as I can and know what was coming. I mean, before I had even seen what a shot looked like, I knew things about carb counting and ratios and stuff just from being part of that diabetic online community and learning from people like you what was coming, I guess.
and that's something that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a huge thing. I was diagnosed in 1987. And so obviously the internet was not quite as big a thing as it is now.
Yeah.
But just with the the culmination of the information that's now online that we have access to. Even when the Type 1 athletes group, when I first joined, I think there was only like 300 to 500 members,
Yeah.
and now we're at or beyond 6,000. So
Yeah.
it's just the culmination of everybody's experience, and everything
Yeah.
has the potential to really set people so much further down the road for success than if you'd just been left blind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you'd have gone with what they said, where you can't ever perform again, you're going to have to quit the circus. That
Yeah. I mean, that
that
was almost worse than finding out I had this thing that I'm going to be stuck with forever. I was like, all right, I can deal with that, but don't take my circus.
yeah, don't take away my passion and my love and everything like that.
Exactly.
That's what kills me, and I'm really, I hope that something that this podcast brings about is just a little more information in showcasing as many athletes as I can. Is that maybe somebody new to diagnosis has just been told that, and
Yeah.
just to show them that there are plenty of us out there doing some of the most extreme things you can possibly do, uh, in anything, and it's still possible with Type 1. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's awesome. Now, so this is probably a pretty close knit community, I would guess. You and the other performers and everything. So
Definitely.
when they found out that you're a Type 1 diabetic, how was the reaction? Was it pretty positive?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people don't understand it, as we all know, don't really get it. So I think most people kind of see it as they would see an asthmatic performer. Like, okay, yeah, she's got this thing, she's got to do this every now and again. But I don't think they really appreciate quite how much of an impact it does have on your life. And because of that, they don't treat me any differently, which kind of suits me fine. I mean, people definitely ask questions, and when it does come up, I tell them, how it all works and what happens, and that's been great. But yeah, no one's kind of. I'm just still getting on with it, really. So it's been pretty much the same.
Well, and that, I think that also speaks to those people like you that have really good control. To the outside, it looks effortless, when
Yeah,
me and you and everybody else know that it's really not. I
yeah,
mean, so that's it. I feel that that's another way that Type 1 gets a really bad rap sometimes, is that people think, oh, you just take a shot and you're fine.
yeah.
Well, there's a bit more to it than that,
A little bit more than that. One
Like you said,
girl, I remember her saying to me, "Wait, you mean you have to do that more than once a day?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, a couple times, couple times."
yep, yep. Yeah, golly. Like you said, you follow I won't say a strict diet, but you do follow a method of eating that lends itself to reducing complications and reducing
Yep.
uh, errors, possible errors. And so, it's a really all encompassing thing that I feel like people just they don't get, and they won't understand it until, they'd have to be around you 24 hours a day
Yeah, exactly.
to watch you and see what that's like. Yeah, I used to test 15 times a day, and people were just dumbfounded. And now I have the
Yeah.
Dexcom, so I test like 4 times a day. And they're like, oh, well, you just have to stick your finger 4 times a day. Like, that's nothing. And I'm like, well, for the like 20 years before then,
Yeah.
it was a
Also,
little
give me a
different.
finger, buddy. Let's see how much you like it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do it the old school way, where they just, do your nurses over there do this? They would just take the lancet and they would
Yeah,
just jab your
just
finger
stick it
with it.
in. Oh, yeah.
I, I'm like, could you just get it like a kitchen knife and stab me? Because that's what it feels like. Oh, we gotta love our nurses, though. So,
Yeah, bless them.
what's something most people don't know about you?
Oh, God. That's put me on the spot. I cannot ride a bicycle. There you go. Admitting it to the internet. I can
Okay.
tightrope walk and drop from 8 feet high on the rafters, but I cannot ride a bicycle. It's on my to-do list. I promise. I'm going to get there.
There's so many questions. There's so many questions. Is it just that you never learned how as a child?
Yeah, I just never had a bike.
Just never had a bike. Fair enough. Fair enough.
No.
I can't swim, so
Oh,
there
okay.
you
Well, there
go.
you go. We're kind of even.
And it's not even like everybody's like, oh no, you can float though. Everybody floats. No, I don't even float. I just sink. Uh,
Yeah, right.
we just call that the troll disease. You know, trolls don't float. We sink. So, how would somebody, and you're a teacher, so this is a good
Hmm.
segue into that. How could somebody go about getting into aerial performing? Like, what channels would they have to go through?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing about aerial performing is that people will say to me, I would love to try that, but I've just got no upper body strength. I'm like, well, go to a class. That's how you get the upper body strength to do it. You know, I mean, no one would ever say, oh, I can't play baseball, so I'm not going to try. But people will go, oh, nah, I can't climb a rope, so I can't do aerial, which is absolutely not true. But circus has become so popular all around the world. It's kind of really taken off in the last 5 or 6 years, I think. So there's so many places doing classes. Pole dance studios quite often do them. Just find a class and go along. That's kind of it. Um, the other thing I always say to my beginners is that you will always be useless for the first couple of weeks. You will feel useless, you won't get off the ground, but you've just got to persist. And that's half the reason I love aerial so much, because you do fail at everything 1,000 times before you get it right. But when you do get it right, it's just such a good feeling.
And
So
it's an art form. I mean, it really is. The
definitely,
performances
yeah.
that I've seen, it's ballet 12 to 15 feet in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's one of those things. It takes dedication and commitment. And I like you said that because you're gonna fail. You're gonna, you know. I just made a post
Yeah,
about that today about all these competitions that I've done, and I've not placed well at all of them. Uh, but even if you fall flat on your face, you will be better after you've done that than you were before.
exactly. Yeah.
And so, uh, and I never even would have thought about the pole dance classes having the classes for the aerial performing either. So that's a,
Yeah, lots of times they do.
because I know, especially in, of course, I'm in Texas, and cheerleading has always been a big thing here because
Mm.
football is a big thing, um, which our version of rugby, our
Yeah.
sissified version of rugby, I'll say it. Um, so what's really funny is that gymnastic studios have really cropped up a lot, and
Yeah.
whereas that wasn't necessarily a big thing around here 10 years ago. And so you're seeing more and more, like you said, it's really developing, and we're seeing more and more push in that direction for young kids to get into and do something along those lines. My daughter took gymnastics for 4 years before
Yeah,
she
great.
finally just kind of went, man, I'm not really into that. So now she wants to show dogs, and that's a whole nother story. Uh, Oh, anything to spend money, I think. Is that what daughters are good for? Is that how that works?
Oh, I hear, I hear.
um, so it's just really neat to see that's being done. That there are more sports options, because not everybody wants to play football. Not everybody wants to. Uh, well, football and soccer are probably the same thing to you. Is that what y'all call it over there? Soccer is
So
football.
yeah, we still call it soccer because we've got AFL football, which is the less sissy version.
of football, yes. I and I just had to look that up the other day because I didn't realize that there's also a type 1 diabetic uh, in.
Yeah, he plays for Sydney, I think.
Yes, I think so. So he retired and spent, I think it said 1,000 days retired, and then he came back and walked right back onto a pro league.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, how do you? Obviously, he's a really good player.
Yeah, he is definitely.
So,
I also
well,
heard
that's
apparently, because his intensity is so high, that he gets away with not taking shots like 80% of the time, which is kind of amazing.
I'm gonna have to track this guy down.
Yeah. I mean, our
Uh,
footballers run like crazy. It's a lot less stop start than your version of the game.
yeah. Well,
Subtle
our
dig there.
players are 400 pounds, and so I think if we didn't let them stop and catch their breath, we'd have a lot more heart attacks on the field. Uh, uh, but that's interesting. I could see where because some of it's sprinting, but people that are in that kind of cardiovascular shape, even
Mm,
sprinting becomes less intense
yeah.
because your body just becomes acclimated to it, and that's interesting. So, we have a few prominent, like the Nick Jonas,
Yeah.
very prominent type 1 diabetic. So, you're aware of this type 1 diabetic in sports. Is there kind of any
Mm.
special mention made in Australia about sports stars or actors that live with type 1?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was a bit of a story around that guy whose name I've completely forgotten, which is terrible. But other than that, not really. I mean, there's been quite a bit in the news lately about type 1 because we've had a new flash monitoring device come out, which I don't think you guys have yet, called the Libra. So that's been in the news a bit. But yeah, not so much really. It's not so much of a thing here, I guess.
And, and we kind of glorify our movie stars and our sports stars into being bigger than life. So that probably has some to do with it over here as
Mm.
well. Um, that's funny you mentioned the Libra. So I've seen it
Yeah.
in a couple of people, and it goes in like the back of the arm.
Well, officially
Uh,
in the back of the arm. I stick mine in my leg, but don't tell my doctor.
it's your secret safe with me. So, but it's not connected to a receiver, is it?
No, it's not. So it takes a reading every minute or every 30 seconds. I can't remember, one of those two. And then there is a receiver that you have to actually scan over the sensor and then it takes the reading. And then you see your graph. So it's not, I don't know how the Dexcom works, like Bluetooth connected or something. So they
Yep.
call it a flash monitor rather than a continuous monitor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. How often is it? Because the Dexcoms, we can get by. We're supposed to change every week. Some of us get by with like 2 to 3 weeks, pretty
Yeah.
easy. I believe there was one guy that went like 86 days
Wow.
without out changing his Dexcom. So how often do you have to change that
Yeah,
out?
this is one of the crap things about it is that as soon as you activate it, it's got a countdown timer for 14 days and then it stops. So there's
Oh,
no ability to extend it. They
yeah.
say it's for reliability, but I suspect it's more about the money.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, and so the Dexcom has the 7 day reset, and so at the exact minute you started the sensor, it's 7 days from then it shuts off,
Yeah,
and the workaround is that you just hit start sensor because it doesn't
yeah,
know that it's still in the same place. So that's interesting. I had heard very little from it, and I don't think it's available anywhere. uh, is it available in the UK,
yeah.
perchance?
UK and a lot of the EU now, and Australia's had it for a bit under a year, I think, not a very long time. Yeah,
Do
and
you
there's no
find that it's
finger
a
pricking at all. You don't have to calibrate it, so no finger pricks ever.
well, that would be nice.
It is nice.
Uh, and the reliability and the accuracy you trust 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of dodgy ones, which I've then just sent back and they've replaced. But for the most part, it's pretty much dead on. There is that 5 minute delay between a finger prick and the intercellular fluid, which is probably the same with the Dexcom, I'd imagine.
Hmm. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, well, for me, if I test 5 minutes apart, it's bang on. So
Huh. And what's funny is that you say 5 minutes. For me, it's 15. There's about a 15, but the Dexcom's also not taking readings that fast, I don't
yeah,
believe. So that's probably part to do with that as well, because there's a lot of times, especially in the not so rare times that I have a traumatic low, I notice that it reads low much longer after the correction, sometimes as long as 20 minutes.
yeah, right,
Um, so that's interesting. That would be a neat piece of equipment. And it's a lot, from what I've seen, it's a lot less intrusive than a Dexcom, because
yeah,
the Dexcom sensors, sticks up about half an inch to three
yeah.
quarters of an inch,
These are about
and so this one's
about the size and width of an Australian 20-cent coin. I don't know what your equivalent is, but they're pretty low profile. Well, actually, they're really, really low profile. The only downside of them is that we don't get the alerts that a Dexcom would give. So there's no low alert or anything like that, which is the bit I really miss. But Dexcom isn't subsidised under our national diabetes scheme, so it would have to be out of pocket. And the Libra works out about $7,000 a year cheaper. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what a lot of Americans are running into, is that insurance plans are changing, not always for the better, and that some people are being disallowed, or it's just not allowed.
yeah,
Dexcoms aren't on their insurance plan, and so yeah, they're very expensive. I had to pay for sensor and a new transmitter out of pocket, and that was a little rough.
yeah,
Um, so, but at least you have an option. That's I could definitely see why the alerts. I mean, that's a pretty big selling point for a lot of people on the
yeah,
Dexcom. So
definitely.
maybe, is this the first iteration of the Libra?
I'm not sure really. I don't know where it's going because it is fairly new. It would be great if they could manage alerts, but I just don't see how they could do it without having that Bluetooth connection, which would then fundamentally change what it is. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, and so that was a lot of the size, because even the G4 versus the G5 is a bigger transmitter,
Yeah,
and the reason being is because that the G4 used a radio signal, and the G5 uses a actual Bluetooth.
yeah,
And so that's why the G5 you can get on your iPhone and blah 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 blah. Supposedly one of these days you can get it on your Android.
we've
I'm
got
not
the
holding my
reverse
breath
problem.
anymore.
So you can get an app to scan
They
your Libra on an Android, but not on the iPhone.
oh, it's always something, isn't
Yeah,
it? You're
always.
just kind of either way. Um, so yeah, and I've seen prototype pictures for the G6, and I think that they're going back to a smaller device, and so it would be nice if we could get a little competition and have the Libra in the States.
Yeah,
I feel like that maybe that would push Dexcom to kind of reevaluate what they're doing,
yeah,
and maybe it would push the Libra thing along too, to get to a better point where I feel like at least if it had a low, like there could be a red light or something
yeah. That'd be
on
nice.
it. It'd be like, hey,
Yeah, you just
you
start
might want to do
blinking.
something. Oh, we're really becoming cyborgs. That's what's happening. Um, so kind of wrapping things up, is there any advice that you would give to our listeners, um, whether they're 1.5s or Moddies, or newly diagnosed?
Yeah. I guess I still feel too much like a newbie to give any kind of practical diabetes advice. But I guess the biggest thing for me was just finding that group of the diabetic online community, like the athletes group, who were just really positive about life. Like when I was first handed my information pack about diabetes, when I got it, it was, all the complications that you list, all that kind of stuff. I found some forums of people that were just miserable, and I was pretty convinced my life was over. I thought that was it now. And then I found all of you guys and realized that life can still be great. It's, maybe slightly more complicated than it was before, but it just totally changed my outlook, So seek out the positive people and surround yourself with them would be my advice.
That's good advice, and I think that carries along much further than just
Oh,
diabetes.
absolutely.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's just an overall life lesson that we all need to
There you
learn
go.
and
Life lesson from
listen to
Kat.
more of. I love it. I love it. Kat, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you, and I think everybody's really gonna be interested in hearing about the aerial performing. I know I learned some things, and I had a lot of respect for you before, but I think that's definitely even gone up a few more
Oh,
notches.
thank you. And vice versa. Your car lifting blows my mind.
I'm just a dum dum that picks up rocks for fun. Nothing I do is that
I don't
spectacular.
know that I'd agree with that.
Uh, all right. Well, I appreciate everybody listening in.
So I know a lot of you have been wondering what is going on with Bolus and Barbells. When are we going to get the next event started, and what have I been doing in the downtime? We saw the need early on to make Bolus and Barbells a more sustainable venture. And so part of that included incorporating the brand and actually making it a business entity. And so we have filed our articles of incorporation, and we are in the process of filing for our 501c3 status. And what that does is that opens us up to be able to receive donations and to seek out sponsors for these events so that we can provide a bigger and better service to the attendees. As far as events, we have two scheduled this year, and I can't really release a whole lot of details because we're still in negotiations on some things. We're looking at early May for the first one, and I'll let you know more things. We hope to have some concrete news and be able to roll that out in the next couple of weeks. I have also addressed the shirt issue by subcontracting out to a third party. And so I have two shirts on their way to me that will kind of be the final proofing before we go live with those. As soon as that is, I'll post the links on Facebook and other forms of social media. So I appreciate everybody's patience, and just know that the downtime has been to make Bolus and Barbells better, to make the events more enjoyable for everybody attending, and to ensure that we can provide events for years to come. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you listening. Please remember to like, share, and help us promote the podcast and in turn promote Bolus and Barbells. Thank you, and I'll see y'all next time.